Hi everybody, I'm Erin Gamble. You can call me Ms. Gamble. I'm a nationally certified Pilates teacher, a certified clinical exercise physiologist, and a licensed physical therapy assistant. And today we're going to be doing Pilates and going over different movement principles. And I hope you'll enjoy it and have some fun. Here we go. So what I'd like to go over first is our wonderful model Horatio. And it's important in the work that we're going to do to be able to identify certain bony landmarks on your body. Because it's all about finding a way to anchor ourselves through the exercises we're going to do. So first I'm going to show you on Horatio. He's being a good subject today. Or she. We haven't really determined yet. Okay, so first I want to bring your attention to the pelvis here. And I want to show you on the very front of the pelvis, it's the bones that are aiming straight at you right now. Those I'm just going to call the front pelvic bones. Okay? And those are important because that will let us know where your pelvis is during the movements and whether or not you're maintaining neutral spine, which I'll talk about in just a minute. The other bone around the pelvis I'd like to talk about is the sacrum, right back here. It's this big flat bone in between these two pelvic bones. And that's going to be another part that's important. If you look at Horatio from the side, you can see that he has three curves to his spine. A little curve in the neck, a curve in the opposite direction in the middle back, and then another curve in on the low back. And we all have different, slightly different curves on our body, but it's really important in a lot of the work that we're doing here to maintain neutral spine, which means we have a little curve in the low back. And that's all, a lot has to do with where this pelvis is. So that's why we need to know where this front pelvic bone is aiming, where is it pointing, and where this sacrum is also. The last couple points I'm going to talk about is the chest bone here and the bottom of the ribs. These are important too because obviously movement here can change the position of the back. So now I have Miss Kaitlyn, yay, with Horatio so I can show on an actual person where those bones are. So Ms. Kaitlyn, can you find your front pelvic bones for me, please? So right there. So same thing that I pointed out with Horatio there. That's the very front side of the pelvis. Great. And then what I'd like you to do is move your hands down a little bit to, yeah, and then if you were to march in place, you can see that these folds now represent the hips. So I want to make this differentiation now, that there's a difference between the pelvic bone, the pelvis, and the hip. And on Horatio, this is the difference between the pelvis and the hip. Those are two different things, although sometimes, and I do this myself too, I call them the same thing. So I will make some references to that when we do our exercises. Now the sacrum, way back here, so kind of on the top above the buttocks, just as we saw on Horatio a moment ago. And if you can now face the side, please. Great. So here you see those nice three curves of the spine that we saw on Horatio earlier. And I really want to focus on this low back curve and what happens when the pelvis moves. So if you can please, yes, perfect. If those front pelvic bones move forward and down, we get a bigger curve here. The problem with that is it makes these muscles work back here. Okay? And that's not what we want to have stabilize the spine. So come back to the center. And then let's have you roll your pelvic bones in towards your ribs. Very nice. So now this rounds out the low back. So those are both kind of extremes, and come back to center. I like to call it like the three pelvic positions, right? We do need to move our spine, but it's in the neutral position that we get the most stabilization, and the muscles help to support it. In any of those other positions, tilting either forward or back, we get a lot of work in the low back, which we don't want that, and those muscles aren't meant to help support back there. Find your chest bone right up there in the lowest part of your rib cage. Yes. So I like to focus on where this chest bone is pointing. Is it pointing straight ahead? Is it pointing up? Is it pointing down? See the differences, and that changes the position of the back too. Last, I want you, can you find the lowest part of your ribs And then with your middle finger, maybe the front pelvic bones.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
There you go. So I also like to monitor the distance here. This is another tool that you can use to see what's happening. Are you arching your back? Then that pulls the distance of the ribs away from the pelvis. So if you arch your back, there you go. So see how this is longer now? And then if you collapse everything forward, you see now there's a shorter distance between the ribs and the pelvic bone. So there's a lot of tools and identifying of these bony landmarks that'll help you focus during the exercise and the movements that we're going to do. We already talked about neutral spine. So if I may have you side facing again. And then again, it's different for everybody, but what it should feel like is it should feel nice and relaxed here. If you feel strain in your low back, then that's probably not your neutral spine. So be aware of that, okay? And then if you face the front of the camera, please, one last time. The last thing is lengthening. And I'm sure all your teachers talk about that, right? Lengthening. But there is a phenomenon that we have the core, which is all the torso muscles, work together as we assume this lengthening, or I like to call it a two-way stretch, right? So head up to the ceiling and feet long into the floor. And I'm going to reference that in more exercises as well. So we have neutral spine and we have lengthening in all positions. So now we get to start our fun exercises, and we have Mr. David as my first exerciser. So let's remember what we went over with the bony landmarks and talking about the positions of the pelvis. So Mr. David, if you can for me, find the front bones of your pelvis in this position. Great. Wonderful. In this position is actually really beneficial because everybody can feel what bones are contacting the floor here. So I just want you to take a moment and feel that you're resting on your sacrum, that maybe one side of your pelvis is a little heavier than the other, maybe one side of your back rib cage is heavier than the other. Just make a mental note of these things, because then after you go through the exercises, it's always interesting to see if there's any change that's happened. So first what we're going to do is an exercise that's going to move your hips, and I call them hip folds. So I want you to make sure that you're aware of where your pelvic bones are. And to start, I just want you to arc one knee up over your hip. And then put it down. And then you're going to switch to the other side. Great. And then as we do this side to side, I want you to feel your pelvis. Is it staying level on the floor, or is it rocking side to side? So now what I'd like you to do is, again, come back to center and feel that those two pelvic bones are aiming straight up to the ceiling like laser beams. And I want you to hold it there as you arc your knee up over your hip. Nice. So now the movement's a lot more slow and controlled. And put it back down and switch to the other side. Good. And here, a lot of times the core is going to work on its own to stabilize the pelvis. I don't really need to cue any muscles, it just does it itself. So in the Pilates breathing, because we're stabilizing so much down here, we're going to come up to the rib cage. A lot of people breathe up in here, and you might, especially when you're stressed out, your shoulders might go up and down, and your lungs, actually the tip of your lungs are way up here, and they're very narrow. As we go down the rib cage where Mr. David's hands are, the lungs get a lot wider. So this is where we can store and use a lot more oxygen. So now on your next inhale, I'd like you to feel that you're actually breathing into your hands and letting your ribcage expand to the sides. So if you were to imagine a bucket, it's like the handles of the bucket come up and away, and then they come back down. And then on your next inhale, see if you can send that breath a little bit into the floor. So now the back of the ribcage is filling with air, and the sides. So this should help take the breath down into those lower lobes of the lungs so you feel less stress in the neck. Good. So let me have you bring your hands back to those front pelvic bones. And we're going to do the same exercise we did before, the hip folds. This time, I want you to take a deep breath in first and through your ribs. And then on the exhale, you're going to arc that knee up over your hip. Nice. Does that feel a little more connected? And then inhale down and then exhale, switch. So you want the movement to follow the breath. Full movement with the full breath is important. Good. And notice that the pelvis is staying in place, it's just the hips that are moving. At some point you're like, oh, this is a bit too much, I'm feeling some strain. I don't want you to go into that strain. I want you to stay in a place that's comfortable. So you don't have to do all the exercises. Find one that works best for you, work there, and progress when you're ready. Okay? So next one, I'd like you to take a breath in, please. And as you exhale, you're going to arc your knee up over your hip, just like you did. Leave it there as you inhale. And then exhale, you bring the left one up to meet it. Up until what we call a tabletop pose. Just like your lower legs are resting on the table. So here you're going to feel a lot more work in the front of the abdominals, connecting the ribs to the pelvis here. If it feels a strain on your back, you have some options. You can move your knees closer to your chest a little bit, and that'll help take some of the back strain off. But for a challenge, you can keep your knees right over your hips. Now from here, take a deep breath in. And then as you exhale, you're going to arc one leg down towards the floor as if you were to touch it. And then bring your leg right back up. So again, here, only let that leg go down as far as you can keep those two pelvic bones aiming up to the ceiling. And when you're ready, the other side is going to go. So we're keeping the back of the knee open on both sides. Good. And you can bend your knees into your chest for a stretch break. Good. Nice. And now while both legs are long, I'd like you to keep your kneecaps both pointing up to the ceiling. Thank you. Nice. Can I take a couple of moments to feel what this feels like in this position? And I'm going to have you lift your right leg up, keeping it nice and straight. Great. See much longer hamstrings than I've ever had. It's wonderful. So in this position, as you lift it, obviously this is a challenging position. I want you to keep the leg nice and straight. And I want you to feel, remember that two-way stretch I talked about? I want you to feel that in the leg. So it's almost like you're feeling a stretch into the hip joint and a stretch up and away from it. So let me have you arc that leg down again. And then when you come to lift it back up, you're feeling almost that this leg lowers down into the hip socket. So lift this leg back up just like you did, that's it. And it's almost like a teeter-totter. The hip sinks down as the foot reaches up and away. Very nice. Good. And back down. And do that a couple times on the left. And you might feel a difference both sides. One, you might be able to get up higher, but it's really important to stop wherever your knee wants to bend. I want you to keep this leg really straight and reaching to the ceiling. Now we're going to come back to the right side. I'm going to have you arc it back up. And this time we're going to do circles. Now it's really important with the circles that we're maintaining where the pelvis is. So if you want to go back to monitoring your pelvic bones, please do. And when you're ready, you're going to start to draw circles with your foot. And how big the circle is depends on how stable the pelvis can stay. So if it's small circles, that's fine. If it's bigger circles, that's fine. Good. And then I'll have you switch directions. And I like how you're kind of getting more comfortable with it and making the circles go bigger. Very nice. Like you're stirring the hip socket in the joint. And one more here. Good. Come back to center, lower this leg back down, and we'll repeat on the left side. And floating that leg up Keeping the back of the knee nice and long, and then getting ready for those circles. And if you find it really challenging to maintain where your pelvis is, think about the stretch. So we're stretching to the whole body. Foot up to the ceiling, head away from the foot, and then switch directions. We have one more. You can do it. So arms out at your sides with your palms flat. Good. And here I want you to feel your shoulder blades now. So remember, those are the bones way back here. Those are going to be anchor points for you in this exercise, okay? We're going to take the leg circle, but now we are going to move the pelvis. You're like, wait, you just told me don't move the pelvis. But this is a more advanced version where we get some spine rotation into it, okay? So let's start with the right leg. You're going to arc it up, nice and long. Here we go. Good. Inhale here, nice into the ribs. Exhale, you're going to cross this leg across your body and let the weight shift to the opposite buttock. There you go. And then you sweep the leg down away from your body. Letting the pelvis come into neutral. Let it stay in neutral. Open the leg out to the side. And then return back up. And now you're on your own. Good. Last leg up. That's it. And rotate over to me so you're shifting your body weight. But you're anchoring on your shoulder blades. Sweeping the leg away from your body. Then really feel here it stays neutral. Those pelvic bones stay aiming up to the ceiling even as the leg goes out. So it's all about leg only goes as far as the pelvis can control. And one more time. Over the knee. Sweep it down. Keep this leg long. There you go. Down and around. Yep, keep it right there. Good control. And back up. And now we're back with Ms. Kaitlyn, and we're going to start into an ab curl series. So what I'd like you first to do is the same thing. Kind of identify how your body is on the floor. Feeling if one side of the pelvis is heavier than the other, and feeling if one side of the rib cage on the back is heavier than the other. For the ab curl series, if we call it ab curl and not ab crunch, that's on purpose. Because we're actually now going to flex the spine, meaning bending it forward, but purposely with muscular control. So what I'd like to have you do is if you can place your hands behind your head and really feel that your head is resting in your hands. Now for these curls, you can have your elbows just in your side view. Wider is harder, but I don't want you to pull on your head. Yeah, exactly. So it should feel like your neck is nice and long, and the back of your skull is just resting heavy in those hands. Wonderful. So we're going to prepare by taking a nice deep inhale. And on the exhale, you're going to nod your chin in, let your chest bone come down, and feel the back of your rib cage coming into the mat as you look at your thighs. Inhale as you return back with control. And exhale, nod the chin, nod the chest bone. And here, it's like you're trying to press the back of the rib cage down into the mat. Inhaling back down. Just two more, looking great. Nice and relaxed, the pelvis is stable on the mat. Inhale back down. And up. Wonderful, come down and rest. Now Ms. Kaitlyn, can you do me a favor and come up and show me an abdominal proof? Okay, there you go, yeah. So one thing to note is this protruding when you come up and come back down? So on hers, she executed them beautifully. We call this rectus profus. It's the rectus abdominal muscle. And it's dominant, and we want it to work, but we don't want it to be the dominant exercise. So what I like to say, can I have you do one more ab curl, please, the proper way? Proper way. Yes. Curl up. You're taking a moment to actually peek. Is this mostly in? Then we know that your core stabilizers are working. Thank you very much. Wonderful. So we're going to progress this ab curl and use some of the exercises we did earlier. So if you can, please arc this knee over your hip, and then the other one's going to come up into a tabletop position. Great. And I'll have you bring your knees right there. And remember your options for tabletop. You can have your knees closer to your chest for it to be easier, or right over your hips. Great. Feel the heaviness of the thigh bone sinking down into the hips to help stabilize the pelvis. And we're going to do some curls here. Inhale here. Exhale, nod the chin, nod the chest. There we go. Up. Nice. And one more. Good. And now this time I'd like you to stay up. And now staying up, you're going to have to breathe. So please rest your head into your hands. Yes, feel the back of that neck nice and long. Inhale here into your rib cage. Exhale, you're going to tap one foot towards the floor. And then bring it back up. And the other side. So we're doing some of the same exercises we did before, just with a static ab hold. You're doing great. Just one more on both sides. She had a hard workout yesterday. And last one on the left. Good. Knees come in and we come down and rest. Good. Now if you feel any strain in the low back, please remember to either stop the exercise or modify it as you need, taking a lot of breaks in between. So have you start again in the tabletop position. Wonderful. Hands behind the head. Really feeling the head cradle. There you go, yeah. So the back of the neck is really nice and long. You don't want to feel this in your neck. We're using the front of the neck, the flexors, to really pull that chin in. So nod the chin, nod the chest, and come up. And we're going to stay there. Now one at a time, I'd like you to reach a leg long away from you. And then bend that knee right back over your hip and change this leg really long, nice and straight. Yes, and back in. Now you have the option of holding on to the stabilizing knee. And then inhale, exhale, switch. Yes. Inhale, exhale, switch. So this is an opportunity to kind of help that hip sink down. Almost give a little pressure the knee down. There you go. And then pull the knees into the chest, come back down and take a break. Good, nice. You have a lot of options there. You can do the hand switch or keep the hands behind your skull if that's more comfortable. Last exercise, you ready?
Yes.
I'm ready. Okay. Let's come back up into that tabletop position, please. Hands behind the head, you know, I love it. Let that neck relax.
I don't want to give it control.
I know, we hold so much tension in our neck. This is a good opportunity to just let it hang out. Nod the chin, nod the chest bone, feeling the ribs come back. Wonderful. Now this one we're going to start with the hands on the knees. Inhale here. On the exhale, you're going to reach your arms and your legs away from each other. Arms come up by the ears. Hold. Swing your arms around, bend the knees in, and hold. Good. Exhale as the arms come up by the ears. Feel that stretch line, yes. Sweep the arms and pull the knees in. Two more. I know you can do it. Exhale, you keep that height. Yes, that's it. And sweep the arms in. Pull, and we have one more time. Exhale, hold. Look at this nice long stretch. Sweep back, let your head come down, and you can rock side to side if that feels good.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Wonderful.